A millionaire was about to jump off a bridge when he was stopped by a 7-year-old homeless girl begging for money to survive. But when she realized what he was about to do, her words had a shocking impact. Watch this story until the end. You won't regret it. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Alexander Pierce stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars beneath him. His reflection stared back, immaculate in his tailored suit, every silver hair perfectly in place, his posture rigid with the discipline that had built his empire. Yet his eyes told a different story, one of profound emptiness that even his $50,000 watch couldn't measure. The quarterly reports lay scattered across his mahogany desk, each page highlighting another record-breaking success. Revenue up 300%, market share doubled, stock prices soaring, headlines that would make any CEO proud. But pride was the last thing Alexander felt as he took another sip of his aged scotch. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Pierce, the board members are waiting in the conference room for your presentation." He pressed the button without emotion. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." His voice carried the authority that had become his trademark, masking the growing void within. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as Alexander entered. 12 faces turned to him, each wearing the same eager expression of shareholders anticipating good news. He had given this presentation countless times before. The graphs, the projections, the strategic vision for the future. It was a dance he had perfected over 2 decades. As he clicked through the slides, his words flowed automatically, a well-rehearsed symphony of corporate success. Our Q4 performance exceeded all expectations. His audience nodded appreciatively, scribbling notes and exchanging knowing glances. But something was different today. Each word felt hollow, each achievement meaningless. The very success he had spent his life pursuing now felt like chains around his neck. After the meeting, Alexander declined the customary celebratory dinner. Instead, he found himself walking through the city streets, his Italian leather shoes carrying him aimlessly through the evening crowd. People rushed past him, absorbed in their own lives, their own stories. None of them knew who he was outside these corporate towers, and perhaps that was the problem. He wasn't sure he knew either. His phone buzzed constantly. Emails, messages, meeting requests. Each notification represented another thread in the web of obligations and expectations that defined his existence. He had built this life brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, until he had reached the very top. But standing at the summit, all he could see was the vastness of what was missing. The autumn wind cut through his expensive suit as he approached Central Park. Couples walked hand in hand, children laughed on the playground, and elderly men played chess at weathered tables. All around him life was happening, real life with all its messiness and warmth. When was the last time he had felt anything real? The last time he had laughed without calculating its effect on a business relationship? The last time he had made a decision based on his heart rather than his profit margins? His phone buzzed again. This time it was a reminder for tomorrow's charity gala, another networking event where he would play his part as the successful businessman, the pillar of society. The thought made his stomach turn. As he walked, memories from his younger days flickered through his mind, dreams that had nothing to do with market shares or profit margins, aspirations that spoke of connection, of meaning, of leaving a mark on the world that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Alexander found himself at a small cafe, the kind of place he would normally pass without a second glance. Through the window, he could see people engaged in conversation, their faces animated with genuine emotion. He stood there, watching, as the reality of his situation crashed over him like a wave. He had everything society told him he should want, everything he had convinced himself he needed. Yet here he was, standing outside a modest cafe, envying the simple joy of human connection that seemed to radiate from within. The weight of his revelation pressed down on him, heavier than any business decision he had ever faced. he had built, an empire of wealth and influence, but somewhere along the way he had lost himself. The realization left him breathless, standing alone on the sidewalk as the city life continued to flow around him, unaware of the crisis unfolding in the heart of one of its most successful sons. The following evening found Alexander at the charity gala, surrounded by the city's elite in the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the gathering, their light reflecting off designer dresses and precious jewelry. It was a scene he had been part of countless times before, but tonight everything felt different. He moved through the crowd mechanically, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. Each interaction felt like a performance, a carefully choreographed dance of social expectations. The champagne in his hand remained untouched as he navigated through conversations about market trends and investment opportunities. "Alexander, darling." A woman in a red designer dress approached, her smile as practiced as his own. "We simply must discuss your company's expansion plans. The board is very interested in—" "Excuse me," he cut her off, something he had never done before. The surprise on her face barely registered as he made his way to the terrace, loosening his bow tie as he stepped into the cool night air. The city stretched out before him, a tapestry of lights and shadows. From this height, the streets below looked like rivers of light flowing endlessly through the urban canyons. He gripped the terrace railing, his knuckles white with tension. Sometimes the view from the top isn't what we expect it to be, is it? The voice startled him. Turning, he found himself face to face with an elderly woman seated in a corner of the terrace. She wasn't dressed in the typical gala attire. Her clothes were simple but elegant, and her grey hair was pulled back in a neat bun. There was something about her presence that commanded attention, despite her understated appearance. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone else was out here," Alexander said, automatically reaching for his professional demeanor. The woman smiled, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. "No need for masks out here, Mr. Pierce. We're both hiding from the same circus, aren't we?" Her directness caught him off guard. "Do I know you?" "Grace Sullivan," she introduced herself. "And no, we haven't met, though I've watched your rise to success with great interest. You remind me of someone I used to know very well." There was something in her tone that made Alexander pause. He found himself taking the seat across from her, away from the muffled sounds of the gala filtering through the glass doors. "Your speech earlier," Grace continued, "about your company's charitable initiatives, it was perfectly delivered. Every word carefully chosen, every gesture precisely calculated. But your eyes told a different story." Alexander felt exposed, as if this stranger had somehow seen through the walls he had spent years building. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Grace leaned forward slightly. 30 years ago, I sat where you're sitting now. Different terrace, same emptiness. I had everything society told me I should want: success, influence, wealth. I was the first woman to break into the upper echelons of investment banking in this city, and I was absolutely miserable. The words hit too close to home. Alexander wanted to leave, to return to the safety of his practiced smile and rehearsed conversations, but something kept him rooted to his seat. What changed, he found himself asking. Grace's eyes softened. "I met someone who showed me that success isn't measured by the height of your tower, but by the depth of your impact on others. Someone who taught me that true wealth isn't counted in bank accounts, but in the lives you touch." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, placing it on the table between them. "I run a foundation now. We work with underprivileged children, giving them opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. It's not as glamorous as corporate takeovers, but every smile we put on a child's face is worth more than any merger I ever negotiated." Alexander picked up the card, turning it over in his hands. "The Foundation for New Beginnings," it read simply. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "Because sometimes, Mr. Pierce, the universe puts the right person in our path at the right moment. Just like someone did for me all those years ago." Grace stood up, smoothing her dress. Our foundation is hosting an event next week at one of our community centers. Not a gala, just a simple gathering where you can see what we do. Come if you'd like, or don't. The choice is yours." With that, she walked back into the ballroom, leaving Alexander alone with her card and thoughts that wouldn't stop swirling. The city lights continued to twinkle below, but somehow they seemed different, now less like a reminder of his success and more like countless points of possibility, each one representing a life he could potentially touch. A week after the gala, Alexander found himself standing before a weathered building in a part of the city he'd never visited before. The foundation for new beginnings occupied an old renovated warehouse, its brick facade a stark contrast to the gleaming glass towers where he usually conducted business. Children's artwork decorated the windows, and the sound of laughter drifted from somewhere inside. He checked Grace's card again, confirming the address. His driver had raised an eyebrow when given the location, but Alexander had dismissed him, choosing to find his own way back. Now standing before the heavy wooden doors, he felt more uncertain than he had during any major business negotiation. Before he could change his mind, the doors swung open and Grace appeared, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "Mr. Pierce, I wasn't sure you'd come." "Neither was I," he admitted, following her inside. The interior was warm and inviting, with colorful murals covering the walls and the smell of fresh-baked cookies in the air. Children of various ages moved through the space, engaged in different activities, some reading, others working on art projects, and a few gathered around computers in a small laboratory setup. "We provide after-school programs, tutoring, meals, and most importantly, a safe space where these kids can dream big," Grace explained as they walked. "Many of them come from challenging circumstances, but here they're free to just be children." A small girl with untamed curls looked up from her book as they passed, offering a shy wave. Alexander found himself waving back, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. "Sarah's one of our regular visitors," Grace said softly. "She walks 3 miles every day after school to be here. When she first came, she could barely read. Now she's top of her class and dreams of becoming a scientist." They continued through the building, and Alexander noticed details his business-trained eye couldn't ignore. Worn furniture that needed replacing, outdated computers, patches in the ceiling that needed repair. Yet despite these material shortcomings, there was something here that his luxurious office lacked, a sense of purpose, of life. In a small kitchen area, teenagers were learning cooking skills under the guidance of a patient instructor. "Our culinary program," Grace explained. "We teach them practical skills, but it's also about building confidence, teamwork, and creativity." A boy who couldn't be more than 15 approached them, proudly holding out a plate of slightly misshapen cookies. "Would you like to try one, sir?" Alexander hesitated for just a moment before accepting a cookie. It was slightly overdone on one side, but as he bit into it, the simple pleasure of the moment, the boy's hopeful expression, the warmth of the cookie, the genuine nature of the interaction, struck him with unexpected force. "These are excellent," he said, and meant it. The boy's face lit up with pride before he hurried back to his station. Grace led him to her office, a modest room filled with photographs of children and thank you cards. "We run on a tight budget," she said, settling behind her desk. "Every dollar goes directly to programs and essential maintenance, but we're always struggling to meet the growing need in the community." Alexander's mind was already running calculations. "Your operation costs must be significant even with volunteers." "We make it work," Grace replied with a slight smile. "But I didn't invite you here for a donation, Mr. Pierce. Money is important. Yes, but what these children need most is something far more valuable. Time, attention, mentorship, people who believe in them." A commotion outside the office drew their attention. A group of children had gathered around one of the computers, excitedly pointing at the screen. Grace excused herself to investigate, leaving Alexander alone with his thoughts. His eyes wandered over the photos on her wall, children graduating, receiving awards, performing in shows. Each image told a story of transformation, of potential. Realized. He thought about the billions in his corporate accounts, the luxuries that had long ceased to bring him any joy, and the empty halls of his penthouse. When Grace returned, she found him standing before a particular photograph, a group shot of children and volunteers at what appeared to be a summer camp. The joy in their faces was palpable, real in a way that made the forced smiles of his corporate events seem like pale imitations. That was last year's wilderness program, Grace said. For many of these kids, it was their first time seeing stars. Without city lights drowning them out. Alexander turned to her, his expression changed. Tell me more about your programs. Everything. I want to understand how this works, how you make a real difference in their lives. The next morning, Alexander's executive assistant nearly dropped her tablet when he announced changes to his schedule. Cancel my golf game with the board members, he instructed, straightening his tie, and clear my Thursday afternoons for the next month. But, sir, the quarterly planning meetings can be handled by the VP of Operations. That's why we have a management team. His tone left no room for argument, though he could see the questions in her eyes. The Alexander Pierce she knew never delegated important meetings, never deviated from his meticulously planned schedule. That afternoon, he returned to the foundation, this time carrying a laptop and a notebook. He sat with Grace for hours, learning about nonprofit operations, child development programs, and the intricate dance of running an organization on limited resources. His business acumen saw countless opportunities for improvement, but for once he wasn't thinking about profit margins. Your grant writing process is inefficient, he noted, reviewing their documents, and your donor database is practically prehistoric. With a few updates to your systems, you could double your fundraising capacity. Grace watched him with amusement. Not all of us have Fortune 500 resources, Mr. Pierce. Alexander, he corrected her, and resources aren't always about money. Sometimes they're about knowledge, connections, experience. He looked up from the laptop, his eyes bright with purpose. Let me help. Not just with funding, though God knows you need it, but with strategy, organization, growth planning. And what would you want in return? Grace asked carefully. The question stopped him short. Throughout his career, every action, every relationship had been transactional. But now, considering his answer, he realized something had shifted within him. A chance to make a difference, he said finally. A real difference, not just the kind that looks good in annual reports. Their conversation was interrupted by a small knock at the door. Sarah, the girl with the curly hair, stood in the doorway clutching a math textbook. Ms. Sullivan, I'm stuck on my algebra homework. Before Grace could respond, Alexander spoke up. I was pretty good at algebra in school. May I try to help? The next hour found Alexander Pierce, CEO of one of the country's largest corporations, sitting at a worn table, explaining quadratic equations to a 12-year-old. He found himself drawing on patience he didn't know he possessed, breaking down complex concepts into simple terms, and feeling genuine satisfaction when Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. You explain it better than my teacher, she declared, solving another problem correctly. Mathematics is just another language, he told her. Once you understand the grammar, you can say anything with it. As he watched Sarah tackle the remaining problems with newfound confidence, Alexander thought about all the meetings he'd sat through that week, the endless discussions about market share and profit optimization. None of them had given him the sense of accomplishment he felt, watching this young girl master a challenging concept. Later, walking back to his car, he pulled out his phone and made a call. James, I need you to research something for me. Everything. You can find about educational technology initiatives, particularly in underfunded communities, and get me a meeting with our head of corporate social responsibility. He paused at his car, looking back at the old warehouse building. Through the windows, he could see children still engaged in various activities, their futures being shaped, one lesson, one interaction at a time. The sight stirred something in him, not the familiar drive for success that had propelled him to the top of the corporate world, but something deeper, more meaningful. The setting sun cast long shadows across the street, and for the first time in years, Alexander Pierce felt truly alive. He had spent decades building an empire that reached toward the sky, but perhaps his true legacy would be built here, at ground level, one child at a time. News of Alexander Pierce's regular disappearances from the office spread quickly through corporate circles. The whispers started in boardrooms and continued through power lunches and cocktail parties. Marcus Sterling, the company's ambitious CFO, watched these developments with growing concern and opportunistic interest. The shareholders are getting nervous, Alex, Marcus announced, striding into Alexander's office one morning. Your recent behavior is unconventional. Skipping board meetings, delegating key decisions, spending time in that questionable part of town. Alexander continued reviewing the document on his desk, a proposal for upgrading the foundation's computer lab. Since when does my schedule concern the shareholders, Marcus? Our quarterly results are the strongest they've ever been. It's about perception, Marcus pressed, leaning forward over the desk. You're the face of this company. Your every move affects market confidence. And right now, people are wondering if you're losing your edge. Finally, Alexander looked up, studying the man before him. He saw something in Marcus's expression that he recognized from his own past, that hungry ambition, the single-minded pursuit of power. Had he really been that transparent in his own machinations? Tell me, Marcus, what's the actual purpose of our company? The CFO blinked, caught off guard. To maximize shareholder value, of course, to dominate our market sector, and that's what we do, Alexander interrupted. I'm asking about why we do it. I don't understand the distinction. Alexander stood, walking to the window. The city sprawled before him, but now he saw it differently, not as a battlefield for corporate conquest, but as a community of real people with real needs. I've been thinking about legacy lately, he said quietly. Not the kind that gets written about in business journals, but the kind that changes lives. Did you know that in the neighborhoods around our headquarters, only 30% of students have access to adequate computer resources? In an age where digital literacy determines future success, we're letting thousands of potential innovators slip through the cracks. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. If this is about corporate social responsibility, we already have programs that consume less than 1% of our annual profits and exist mainly for tax benefits, Alexander cut in. I'm talking about real investment in our community's future, the kind that might not show immediate returns on a balance sheet, but could transform generations. The board won't approve any significant diversion of resources, Marcus warned. They're business people, not philanthropists. Alexander turned back to his CFO, a slight smile playing on his lips. That's where you're wrong. They're human beings first, Marcus. Sometimes they just need to be reminded of that fact. He picked up a thick folder from his desk and handed it to Marcus. Here's my proposal for a comprehensive community development initiative. The numbers show how strategic investment in education and community programs could create a skilled workforce pipeline, reduce our recruitment costs, and generate positive brand value worth billions. But more importantly, it's the right thing to do. Marcus took the folder reluctantly. You're really serious about this? More serious than I've ever been about anything. Alexander sat back down, his expression resolute. The world is changing, Marcus. The old model of success at any cost is becoming obsolete. Companies that thrive in the future will be those that understand their role in the larger social ecosystem. After Marcus left, Alexander pulled out Grace's business card, now worn at the edges from frequent handling. He thought about Sarah and the other children at the foundation, about their potential and their dreams. Then he thought about his own childhood, about the hunger for success that had driven him to build his empire. He opened his laptop and began typing an email to his board members. It was time to schedule an emergency meeting. But first, he had a commitment to keep. He'd promised to help with the Foundation's Career Day presentation. As he gathered his things to leave, his phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Board members concerned about recent proposals, requesting private meeting tomorrow. Alexander smiled, slipping the phone into his pocket. Let them worry. For the first time in his career, he was fighting for something bigger than profits and power. He was fighting for the future, not just of his company, but of the community it served. The Foundation's main hall had been transformed for Career Day, Makeshift booths lined the walls, each representing a different profession: doctors, engineers, artists, entrepreneurs. Alexander stood at his assigned station, watching as groups of children moved from booth to booth, their eyes wide with possibility. Sarah approached his booth, now more confident in his presence after their algebra sessions. "Mr. Pierce, what does it really take to become successful like you?" The question gave him pause. A month ago, he would have rattled off platitudes about hard work and determination. Now, looking at her eager face, he found himself searching for a different kind of truth. "You know, Sarah, I'm learning that success isn't just about what you achieve for yourself. It's about what you help others achieve." He gestured around the room. "Look at Ms. Sullivan. By traditional measures, she could have been much wealthier, but she chose to build this place instead. And look at how many lives she's touched." Sarah considered this, twirling a curl around her finger. "But don't you need money to help people?" "Resources are important," he acknowledged, "but they're just tools. The real question is how you use them." Their conversation was interrupted by Grace, who approached with a worried expression. "Alexander, there's someone here to see you. He's quite insistent." In the Foundation's modest office, Marcus Sterling waited with barely contained impatience. His designer suit looked out of place among the children's artwork and donated furniture. "The board meeting has been moved up to this afternoon," Marcus announced without preamble. "They're voting on your proposal and your leadership." Alexander felt a familiar tension creep into his shoulders. On what grounds? Erratic behavior, deviation from corporate objectives, risk to shareholder interests. Marcus ticked off the points on his fingers. "Some members feel your recent preoccupations have compromised your judgment." Through the office window, Alexander could see the career day activities continuing. A young boy was excitedly describing his dream of becoming a teacher to one of the volunteers. The scene stood in stark contrast to the corporate machinations threatening to unfold. "Who's behind this, Marcus?" "Really?" His CFO had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "The concerns are widespread." "But you're the one orchestrating them," Alexander said quietly. It wasn't a question. "You've been laying the groundwork for this since you noticed." My attention shifting to the Foundation. "The company needs focused leadership, Alex. Someone who understands that business is business, not a charity." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Alexander. How many times had he himself used similar tactics to remove obstacles to his ambitions? The corporate world he'd helped build had no patience for transformation, no tolerance for values that couldn't be quantified in quarterly reports. "What time is the meeting?" he asked, his voice level. 3 o'clock. The board expects you to defend your position." Marcus straightened his tie. Though given the sentiment, it might be easier to negotiate a graceful exit. After Marcus left, Grace entered the office. She had overheard enough to understand the situation. "Alexander, I never meant for your involvement here to cause such problems." He turned to her, and to her surprise, he was smiling. "You know what I realized, Grace? For the first time in my career, I'm fighting for something that matters more than my position or power." "What will you do?" "First, I'm going to finish my shift at Career Day. These kids deserve to know that their dreams matter." He checked his watch. "Then I'm going to go remind my board that true leadership isn't about maintaining the status quo. It's about having the courage to change it." Grace touched his arm gently. "Whatever happens, you've already made a difference here." Alexander looked out at the hall again, where children were still moving from booth to booth, their futures still unwritten. "No," he said softly, "they're the ones who made a difference in me." At precisely 3 o'clock, Alexander stood before the board of directors in the top-floor conference room. 12 pairs of eyes watched him with varying degrees of skepticism and concern. The city skyline stretched behind him through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a reminder of all he had built and all he now stood to lose. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "I understand you have concerns about my recent initiatives and leadership direction. Let me be clear about something. I'm not here to defend my position. I'm here to challenge yours." A murmur rippled through the room. Marcus, seated at the far end of the table, shifted uncomfortably. For 20 years, we've measured success in stock prices and market share. We've built an empire on the premise that profit is the ultimate goal. But what if we've been asking the wrong questions? What if our true potential lies not in what we can accumulate, but in what we can contribute? Alexander clicked to the first slide of his presentation. It showed Sarah, the young girl from the foundation, working at one of their outdated computers. This is Sarah. She walks 3 miles each day after school to access a computer that's older than she is. She dreams of becoming a software engineer. Click to the next slide, a map of their city with areas highlighted in red. These are the neighborhoods within a 5-mile radius of our headquarters. In these areas, digital literacy rates are below 30%. We're surrounded by untapped potential, by future innovators who lack the basic tools to realize their dreams. Board member Elizabeth Chen leaned forward. Alexander, while this is all very touching, our responsibility is to our shareholders. Is it? Alexander challenged. Or is that just the convenient answer we've hidden behind? Look at these numbers. He switched to a detailed financial projection. A comprehensive community development initiative would cost less than 2% of our annual profits, but the long-term returns in talent pipeline, brand value, and market goodwill would far exceed that investment. You can't quantify goodwill, Marcus interjected. The markets deal in concrete values. Alexander turned to his CFO with a slight smile. Actually, Marcus, you can, and I have. He distributed thick folders to each board member. These reports detail similar initiatives by other Fortune 500 companies. The data shows that corporations with strong community investment programs consistently outperform their peers in long-term market value. He paused, looking each board member in the eye. But this isn't just about numbers. It's about legacy. Not the kind that gets carved into building facades or printed in annual reports, but the kind that changes lives. We have the power to transform our community, to create opportunities that ripple through generations. Richard Bennett, the eldest board member, spoke up. You're asking us to fundamentally change our corporate philosophy, Alexander. That's no small request. I'm asking us to evolve, Alexander corrected, to recognize that in today's world, corporate success and social responsibility aren't opposing forces. They're interconnected. We can't thrive as an island of prosperity in a sea of need. He clicked to his final slide, a series of photographs from the Foundation's career day, children's faces lit with hope and possibility. These aren't just nice pictures for a CSR report. These are our future employees, our future customers, our future leaders. Every time we choose profit over potential, we're not just failing them, we're failing ourselves. The room fell silent. Alexander could see the board members exchanging glances, some thoughtful, others skeptical. Marcus was furiously scribbling notes, his expression darkening. I won't pretend this transition would be easy, Alexander continued. Change never is. But I believe it's necessary, not just for our company's future, but for the future of the communities we serve. The question isn't whether we can afford to make this change, it's whether we can afford not to. Elizabeth. Chen studied the reports before her, her expression unreadable. You've clearly put significant thought into this, Alexander, but the scope of what you're proposing is exactly what this company needs, he finished firmly. We've always prided ourselves on being industry leaders. Well, this is our chance to lead in a way that truly matters. As the sun began to set outside the conference room windows, casting long shadows across the polished table, Alexander faced his board with quiet determination. The vote that would follow could end his career as he knew it, but looking at the photographs of the Foundation's children still displayed on the screen behind him, he knew that some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant losing everything else. The tension in the boardroom was palpable as Elizabeth Chen cleared her throat. As the head of the governance committee, her opinion carried significant weight. Before we vote, I'd like to share something personal. She opened her designer handbag and pulled out a faded photograph. This was my mother 40 years ago. She cleaned offices in a building not unlike this one, dreaming that her daughter might someday work in one of them. Every night, she would bring home discarded business magazines from executives' trash bins, teaching herself English by reading them to me. Elizabeth passed the photo around the table. I sit here today because someone took a chance on a scholarship program for cleaning staff's children. Someone somewhere decided that profit wasn't the only measure of corporate success. Richard Bennett nodded slowly. My first job was through a community youth program sponsored by the company I would eventually lead. We seem to have forgotten that businesses don't exist in a vacuum. They're part of a larger social ecosystem. Marcus shifted in his seat, sensing the mood of the room changing. With all due respect, these personal anecdotes don't address the fundamental risk to our business model. On the contrary, Alexander interjected, they speak directly to it. Every person in this room benefited from someone looking beyond immediate profit. We're not just executives, we're products of investment in human potential. A gentle knock at the door interrupted the discussion. Grace Sullivan entered, apologizing for the intrusion. I'm sorry, but there's something you all need to see. She was followed by Sarah and several other children from the foundation, each carrying a laptop. Without a word, they set up their computers on the conference room's side table. What is this? Marcus demanded. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly but determined. We heard Mr. Pierce might be in trouble for helping us, so we wanted to show you what his help means. One by one, the children presented projects they'd been working on, software programs, business proposals, community improvement plans. Each presentation was rough around the edges, but filled with innovation and passion. I wrote this code after Mr. Pierce helped me understand algorithms, Sarah explained, showing a simple but functional educational game she'd created. Now I'm teaching other kids how to code too. Another student, Marcus's age son's classmate as it turned out, demonstrated a proposal for a neighborhood recycling initiative. We used the business planning templates Mr. Pierce showed us. It's not just about making money, it's about making things better. The board members watched in silence as one presentation followed another. These weren't polished corporate pitches. They were raw demonstrations of potential being realized. Grace stepped forward again. We didn't come to pressure you. We came to show you that corporate responsibility isn't just a line item on a budget. It's an investment in real people with real dreams. Elizabeth Chen was the first to speak. How many other children could benefit from expanded programs like these? Thousands, Grace replied, in this city alone. Richard Bennett studied the children's presentations with growing interest. The technological aptitude these young people are developing, we're always talking about future workforce development. It's happening right here. Marcus stood abruptly. This is highly irregular. We can't base major corporate decisions on emotional appeals and children's projects. Why not? Alexander challenged. Isn't the future of these children exactly what we should be basing our decisions on? Every market projection, every quarterly report, every strategic plan, ultimately, they're all about shaping the future. These children are that future. Sarah looked directly at the board members. Mr. Pierce taught us that success isn't just about making money, it's about making a difference. Isn't that what great companies do? The wisdom in her simple statement hung in the air. Alexander watched as his board members exchanged glances, saw something shifting in their expressions. Even Marcus seemed affected, though he struggled to maintain his opposition. Elizabeth Chen picked up her voting ballot, then paused. Before we proceed with this vote, I have a proposal of my own. I move that we expand the scope of Alexander's initiative. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. The sun had fully set now, the city lights twinkling below like stars. In that moment, as the board prepared to vote, Alexander realized that whatever the outcome, something fundamental had already changed. The children's presence in this fortress of corporate power had bridged two worlds that should have never been separate in the first place. The morning after the board meeting, Alexander's office felt different. The same pristine furniture and panoramic views remained, but the energy had shifted. On his desk, alongside the usual corporate reports, sat a hand-drawn thank you card from Sarah and the other foundation children. His phone had been buzzing non-stop since the news broke. The board's unanimous vote to not only retain him, but to expand his community initiative had sent ripples through the corporate world. Some called it revolutionary, others reckless, but everyone was talking about it. Elizabeth Chen appeared in his doorway, a stack of papers in her arms. The press requests are piling up. Everyone wants to know what inspired Pierce Industries' dramatic shift in corporate philosophy. Alexander smiled, picking up Sarah's card. Tell them the truth. We got schooled by a group of kids who understand more about real value than all our MBAs combined. The marketing team wants to launch a major campaign around the initiative, Elizabeth continued. They're talking about brand repositioning, social impact metrics, the whole works. No. Alexander's response was firm. This isn't about publicity or brand enhancement. The moment we turn it into a marketing exercise, we lose the authenticity that makes it meaningful. Elizabeth nodded, understanding. What's our first move, then? Alexander pulled out a detailed plan he'd been working on since the vote. We start with education technology. Every school in our target neighborhoods gets updated computer labs and internet access. But hardware alone isn't enough. We need mentorship programs, coding workshops, creative technology initiatives. The budget implications are significant, I know. But we're not just spending money, we're investing in future talent. Think about it. In 5 to 10 years, we'll have a pipeline of skilled, motivated young people who understand both technology and community impact. That's worth more than any traditional recruitment program. A knock at the door interrupted them. Grace stood there with Marcus Sterling, of all people. The CFO's usual confident demeanor seemed subdued. Marcus has something he'd like to discuss, Grace said, giving Alexander a meaningful look. Marcus stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. My son came home last night talking about the Foundation's presentation. Turns out he knows some of the kids in the program. He asked me why our company wasn't doing more to help his friends. Alexander leaned back in his chair, waiting. I've been looking at the numbers again, Marcus continued. If we restructure some of our tax strategies and optimize our charitable giving, we could potentially double the initiative's budget without significantly impacting shareholder returns. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. That's quite a reversal, Marcus. Let's just say I was reminded that spreadsheets don't tell the whole story. He placed a folder on Alexander's desk. I've outlined some preliminary proposals for financial restructuring to support expanded community programs. Alexander studied his CFO with new appreciation. Would you be interested in heading up the financial strategy for the initiative? We need someone who understands both the numbers and the stakes. The surprise on Marcus's face quickly gave way to thoughtful consideration. Actually, I have some ideas about involving our financial sector partners, creating a consortium for community investment. Grace watched this exchange with a knowing smile. It's amazing how things change when we start seeing people as people, not just numbers or obstacles. Speaking of change, Elizabeth interjected, the other board members want to know when they can visit the foundation. Richard Bennett is particularly interested in the coding program. Alexander stood, looking out at the city below. From this height, he used to see only business districts and market territories. Now he saw communities, potential, lives interconnected, in a complex web of possibility. Schedule the visits, but not all at once, he said. This isn't about photo ops. I want them to really understand what happens there, to meet the kids, to get involved personally. He turned back to his colleagues. We're not just changing corporate policy, we're changing corporate culture. It's not enough to write checks or launch programs. We need to fundamentally rethink how business interacts with community. Grace nodded approvingly. The children are excited about having new mentors. Sarah's already planning to show the board members her latest coding project. Perfect, Alexander said. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about us teaching them. It's about all of us learning from each other. As the others filed out of his office, Alexander picked up Sarah's thank you card again. Inside, she had written, "Thank you for showing us that dreams can come true if someone believes in them." Below her signature, she'd drawn a simple but powerful image, a bridge connecting two worlds with people walking across in both directions. 1 month into the initiative, the Foundation's old warehouse building was barely recognizable. New computers hummed in the expanded computer lab, their screens reflecting the eager faces of children exploring digital worlds. The walls, once bare brick, now showcased professional murals designed and painted by local artists, depicting scenes of learning, growth, and community. But the real transformation wasn't in the physical space, it was in the people who filled it. Alexander watched from the doorway as Marcus Sterling, dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, helped a group of teenagers develop a business plan for their community recycling project. The CFO, who had once opposed everything this place stood for, now spent every Wednesday afternoon here, teaching financial literacy and entrepreneurship. "Your profit projections are solid," Marcus was saying, "but have you considered the social impact metrics? Those could be just as valuable to potential investors." Nearby, Elizabeth Chen led a girls' coding club, her corporate polish replaced by genuine enthusiasm as she explained programming concepts. Sarah, now one of the program's peer mentors, assisted younger students with their projects. "Remember what Mr. Pierce taught us?" Sarah told a frustrated young coder. "Sometimes the best solutions come from looking at the problem differently." Grace appeared beside Alexander, coffee cups in hand. "Penny, for your thoughts?" He accepted the coffee with a smile. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in such a short time, and not just here." Indeed, the initiative's impact had begun to spread beyond the Foundation's walls. Other companies in the city had taken notice, launching their own community programs. The local Business Journal had replaced its usual coverage of mergers and acquisitions with stories about corporate social responsibility and community investment. The mayor's office called again, Grace mentioned. "They want to discuss expanding the program to other neighborhoods." "What do you think?" Alexander asked. "Are we ready to grow?" "The question is whether we can afford not to. Every day we turn away children because we're at capacity. Each one represents potential waiting to be realized." Their conversation was interrupted by excited voices from the computer lab. Sarah and her team were demonstrating their latest project, a mobile app designed to connect community volunteers with local needs. "We built it using the development tools Mr. Pierce's company provided," Sarah explained to the gathered crowd. "It's not just about technology, it's about bringing people together to help each other." Alexander felt a familiar warmth in his chest as he watched her present. Gone was the shy girl he'd first met. In her place stood a confident young leader, already thinking about how to lift others up alongside her. Richard Bennett, who had become a regular presence at the Foundation, joined them at the doorway. "You know, Alexander, I've been on corporate boards for 30 years. I've seen every kind of business strategy, every market trend, but I've never seen anything quite like this." "What do you mean?" "Most corporate initiatives are about numbers, market share, profit margins, shareholder value. This is about transformation, not just of communities but of people." He gestured to Marcus, still engrossed in mentoring his young entrepreneurs. "Look at Sterling. A month ago he was the embodiment of corporate coldness. Now he's teaching kids about social enterprise." Grace nodded thoughtfully. "It's like dropping a stone in a pond. The ripples keep spreading, touching lives we never expected to reach." Alexander watched as a new group of children arrived for the afternoon session, their faces lighting up as they entered the space. Each one carried dreams and potential that, just a short time ago, might have gone unrealized. "You know what the most remarkable thing is?" he said quietly. "We're not just changing their future, they're changing ours. Every person who gets involved here leaves with a new perspective, a new understanding of what success really means." Through the windows, the city skyline stood against the afternoon sun. The same buildings, the same streets, but somehow everything looked different now. The glass towers were no longer just monuments to corporate success. They were beacons of possibility, bridges between worlds that had been separate for too long. Sarah's voice rang out from the computer lab, explaining a complex coding concept to a younger student. "See, Sometimes the hardest part is taking the first step, but once you start, you realize you can do more than you ever imagined. Alexander smiled, recognizing his own words coming back in her voice, transformed by her understanding and passion. The future was being written in this room. One line of code, one mentoring session, one transformed life at a time. The success of the Foundation's program brought with it a new set of challenges. 3 months into the initiative, Alexander found himself facing an unexpected crisis. The Foundation's waiting list had grown to over 500 children, and every day brought more applications. "We have to turn away dozens of kids each week," Grace explained during their morning meeting. The stress was visible in her usually calm demeanor. "Word has spread about our programs, especially the technology initiatives. Every parent wants their child to have these opportunities." Alexander studied the stack of applications on Grace's desk. Each folder represented a child with dreams, potential, and hope. The thought of turning any of them away felt like a personal failure. "What about the expansion plans?" he asked. "The mayor's office offered us space in other neighborhoods." "The spaces are available," Grace confirmed, "but it's not just about buildings. We need qualified mentors, equipment, support staff, and most importantly, we need to maintain the quality of our programs. This isn't something we can scale up overnight without losing what makes it special." Sarah knocked on the office door, tablet in hand. She had recently been appointed to the Student Advisory Board, a new initiative to give the children a voice in the Foundation's direction. "Sorry to interrupt, but I think we might have a solution to discuss," she said, her confidence growing with each passing day. "We've been talking about it in the coding club." Alexander gestured for her to continue, remembering how this young girl's insight had already changed so much. "What if we created a student mentor program?" Sarah suggested, pulling up a detailed presentation on her tablet. "Many of us who've been here since the beginning could help teach newer students. We could handle the basic stuff, freeing up the professional mentors for advanced topics." Grace and Alexander exchanged impressed looks as Sarah walked them through her proposal. The presentation was thorough, complete with implementation timeline and resource requirements. "We even created a prototype scheduling app," Sarah added, demonstrating the software. "It matches student mentors with new students based on interests and availability." "This is remarkable," Grace said, examining the proposal. "But are you sure you want to take on that responsibility? Being a mentor is a serious commitment." Sarah's expression grew serious. "Mr. Pierce taught us that success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about helping others achieve too. We want to pass on what we've learned." Alexander felt a surge of pride, not just in Sarah, but in all the children who had embraced the Foundation's values so completely. "What do you think, Grace? Could this work?" Before Grace could answer, Marcus appeared in the doorway looking concerned. "Alexander, we need to talk. The media's gotten wind of our expansion plans, and there's some pushback." He handed over a tablet displaying several news articles. The headlines made Alexander's heart sink. "Pierce Industries' corporate responsibility or corporate overreach. Shareholders question extended community investment. Is Pierce's social initiative sustainable? Some analysts are suggesting we're straying too far from our core business," Marcus explained. "They're questioning whether this level of community investment is responsible stewardship of corporate resources." Sarah, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Can I show them our impact metrics? We've been tracking everything: academic improvements, skill development, even how many of us are now helping our parents with technology at home." Alexander looked at the young girl with newfound appreciation. Even in the face of corporate skepticism, she was thinking like a true leader, focusing on data, results, and real impact. "Actually," he said slowly, an idea forming, "maybe it's time we showed everyone exactly what we've built here, not through press releases or corporate reports, but through the voices of the people whose lives have been changed." He turned to Sarah. "How would you and your fellow students feel about hosting an open house, not just for the media or shareholders, but for everyone, other companies, community leaders, families? Let them see firsthand what happens when we invest in potential." Sarah's eyes lit up. We could demonstrate our projects, show how we're using technology to solve real community problems, and the student mentor program could be our big announcement. Grace nodded thoughtfully. It would be a powerful way to address the skepticism. Rather than defending our initiative, we let the results speak for themselves. Marcus, who had been quietly absorbing the conversation, added, I could prepare a financial impact report showing how our community investment is actually strengthening our long-term business position. Combined with the human element, we're not just running programs, Alexander concluded. We're building a new model for how business and community can work together. It's time we showed the world what that really means. As they began planning the open house, Alexander watched Sarah working with Grace on the presentation outline. In her poised determination, he saw the future, not just of the foundation, but of business itself. Sometimes the best answers to adult skepticism came from the very children they were trying to help. The day of the open house arrived with an energy that seemed to vibrate through the foundation's halls. The children had transformed the space into a showcase of possibility, with project demonstrations set up throughout the building and student guides ready to lead tours. Sarah stood at the entrance, greeting visitors in a blazer she had chosen specially for the occasion. Her tablet displayed the day's schedule, which she had helped organize with precision that would have impressed any corporate event planner. Welcome to the foundation, she said confidently to each new arrival. Would you like to see how we're building the future? The guest list was impressive. Corporate leaders, community organizers, government officials, and media representatives filled the halls. But it was the families from the neighborhood, drawn by word of mouth and hope, who truly brought the event to life. Alexander watched as Marcus led a group of financial analysts through the computer lab, where students demonstrated their latest projects. The CFO's presentation was different now, focused not just on numbers but on stories of transformation. Yes, we've invested significant resources, Marcus explained to his colleagues, but look at what that investment has produced. He gestured to a young student presenting a machine learning algorithm she had developed to optimize the community food bank's distribution system. This is innovation with purpose, driven by real community needs. In another room, Elizabeth Chen hosted a panel discussion where student mentors shared their experiences. Sarah's presentation on the mentor program's impact drew spontaneous applause. We're not just learning skills, she explained to the audience. We're learning how to lead, how to teach, how to make a difference. And isn't that what education should be about? Grace moved through the crowd, answering questions and connecting visitors with students. She paused beside Alexander, watching, as a group of corporate executives engaged in an animated discussion with teenage app developers. They're starting to get it, she said quietly. This isn't charity, it's transformation. Richard Bennett approached them, accompanied by leaders from other major companies. The innovation happening here, it's extraordinary. We've been thinking too small about corporate social responsibility. This is about reshaping the relationship between business and community. A commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A group of shareholders who had been skeptical of the initiative had arrived. Alexander moved to greet them, but Sarah was already there. You have concerns about the program's value? She asked them directly. Let me show you what your investment has created. She led them through the building, not with rehearsed speeches, but with genuine enthusiasm and clear evidence. She showed them the coding projects that were solving real community problems, the mentorship programs that were creating young leaders, the technological solutions that were bridging social gaps. At each stop, other students joined in, sharing their stories and demonstrations. These weren't polished corporate presentations. They were authentic expressions of growth, learning, and purpose. One of the shareholders, a woman who had been particularly critical, pulled Alexander aside. I came here expecting to see a well-meaning but inefficient use of corporate resources, she admitted. Instead, I'm seeing the future of business education and community development. How do we support expanding this model? By late afternoon, the foundation was buzzing with new energy. Partnerships were being formed, commitments made, possibilities explored. Other companies were asking about implementing similar programs, and community leaders were offering spaces for expansion. Alexander found himself in Grace's office, taking a moment of quiet amid the excitement. Sarah's original thank you card was framed on the wall now, its simple drawing of a bridge between worlds more meaningful than ever. "You know what the best part is?" Grace said, joining him. "This isn't the end of something, it's just the beginning. Every person who walked through these doors today is leaving with a new understanding of what's possible." Outside, the sun was setting on a day that had changed more than just the Foundation's future. It had shown a new way forward, a path where business success and community transformation weren't opposing forces, but essential partners in building a better world. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her blazer slightly rumpled, but her eyes bright with excitement. "Mr. Pierce, the news crews want to do final interviews, but I think they should talk to our new student mentors first. After all, they're the ones who are going to change the world." Alexander smiled, recognizing in her words the truth that had brought him to this place. Sometimes the greatest leadership comes from those we set out to help, and the most valuable returns can't be measured in quarterly reports. The success of the open house catalyzed a wave of change that swept through the city's corporate landscape. Within weeks, Alexander's office was flooded with requests from other companies wanting to participate in what the media had dubbed the Foundation model. One morning, as autumn painted the city in gold and crimson, Alexander arrived at the Foundation to find an unexpected visitor waiting in Grace's office, James Chen, CEO of Global Tech Solutions and Elizabeth's younger brother. "I watched the coverage of your open house," James said, after introductions were made. "It reminded me of something I'd forgotten, why I got into technology in the first place. It wasn't about market share or stock options. It was about changing lives through innovation." Grace brought coffee as they settled into a discussion. Through the office window, they could see Sarah leading a coding workshop for new students, her confidence growing with each passing day. "We have resources," James continued, "development tools, hardware, expertise. But what you've built here is something we never managed to create, genuine connection with the community. I want to help expand this model, not just replicate it." Before Alexander could respond, Sarah knocked on the door, tablet in hand. "Sorry to interrupt, but I think you should see this." She pulled up a presentation she and her fellow student mentors had been working on. "We've been mapping all the requests for help we've received from other neighborhoods," she explained, displaying a detailed city map with dots representing each request. There are clusters forming, especially around technology deserts, areas where kids don't have access to digital resources. James leaned forward, intrigued. "You've created a heat map of digital inequality in the city." "Not just that," Sarah continued, switching to another screen. "We've also mapped available resources, empty buildings, potential corporate partners, community organizations. We think we can create a network of learning hubs, all connected through technology." Alexander watched with pride as Sarah walked them through her team's analysis. The young girl who had once asked for help with algebra was now presenting sophisticated data analysis to corporate leaders. The student mentors from each hub could connect virtually, she explained, sharing knowledge and resources. "We're already developing a platform for it." James was visibly impressed. "This is exactly the kind of innovation we need. Not technology for technology's sake, but technology with purpose." He turned to Alexander. "What if we created a partnership? Global Tech could provide the technological infrastructure, while the Foundation provides the educational framework and community connection." Grace, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "The challenge isn't just resources, it's maintaining the personal touch that makes our program work. These aren't just numbers on a map, they're individual children with unique needs and dreams." "That's why we developed the mentor matching algorithm," Sarah interjected. "It helps us pair students based on interests, learning styles, and goals. We could adapt it for a larger scale." As they discussed possibilities, more visitors arrived, community leaders who had heard about the expansion plans and wanted to offer their support. Among them was Mrs. Rodriguez, a longtime resident who ran a community center in one of the underserved neighborhoods. "Our children have been watching what's happening here," she said, her eyes bright with emotion. "For the first time, they see a future they can be part of building. We don't want charity. We want partnership." Alexander looked around the room at this impromptu gathering of corporate power, community wisdom, and young innovation. The barriers that had once seemed so insurmountable were dissolving, replaced by bridges of understanding and collaboration. "What if we think even bigger?" he suggested, "not just about expanding our program, but about creating a new model of community development. One where business, technology, and community work together as equal partners." Sarah's hand shot up, a habit from her student days that made everyone smile. "We could create a youth advisory board for each new hub," she proposed. "Let the kids help design the programs they'll be using. That's what made the difference here. You listened to us." James nodded enthusiastically. "And we could develop a technology curriculum that focuses on solving real community challenges. Give these young innovators the tools to build solutions for their own neighborhoods." As the discussion continued, Alexander stepped back for a moment, watching the energy in the room. The foundation had started as an attempt to fill a void in his own life, but it had grown into something far more significant, a catalyst for systemic change. Through the window, he could see new students arriving for afternoon sessions, their faces bright with anticipation. Each one carried not just dreams, but the potential to transform their communities. The foundation wasn't just growing, it was evolving, becoming something larger than any single person or organization. The partnership with Global Tech Solutions brought rapid changes to the foundation. Within weeks, new technology began arriving. Not just computers and tablets, but advanced development tools, virtual reality equipment, and artificial intelligence platforms. More importantly, it brought new perspectives and possibilities. One afternoon, Alexander watched as Sarah and her team demonstrated their mentor matching platform to a group of tech executives. The platform had evolved far beyond its original concept, incorporating machine learning algorithms to create more effective educational partnerships. "The system learns from each interaction," Sarah explained, her confidence evident as she walked the executives through the code. "It doesn't just match mentors and students. It helps us understand what makes successful learning relationships work." James Chen, who had become a regular presence at the foundation, nodded approvingly. "This could revolutionize how we approach educational technology. It's not just about delivering content, it's about fostering real human connections." The demonstration was interrupted by excited voices from the main hall. A group of students from one of the new satellite locations was arriving for their first joint session with the original foundation members. The expansion had begun, with 3 new locations already operating and 5 more in development. Grace appeared at Alexander's side, watching as the students began to mingle. "Remember when we worried about losing our personal touch as we grew? Look at them. They're showing us how to scale connection, not just operations." She was right. The new students were quickly absorbed into project groups, sharing stories and ideas. Technology might have facilitated their connection, but it was the culture of collaboration and support that made it work. Marcus Sterling, who had transformed from skeptic to champion, was leading a workshop on social enterprise. "Your business plans need to consider both financial and social returns," he was explaining to a group of teenagers. "Success isn't just about profit, it's about impact." The changes weren't limited to the foundation. Other companies had begun implementing elements of their model, creating their own community partnerships. The city's business landscape was slowly transforming, with corporate success increasingly measured by community impact as well as financial returns. Elizabeth Chen joined them, fresh from a board meeting. "The shareholders are more than convinced. Now," she reported, "the foundation model isn't just changing lives, it's changing how we think about corporate responsibility. Other companies are asking how they can get involved." A small commotion drew their attention to the computer lab, where Sarah and a student from one of the new locations had just solved a particularly challenging coding problem. The two girls hugged, their excitement transcending the fact that they'd only met in person that day. "That's what it's all about," Grace said softly. "Not just teaching skills, but building bridges between people who might never have connected otherwise." Alexander watched as more students gathered around, the successful coders, eager to learn from their breakthrough. In that moment, he saw the future taking shape, not in corporate boardrooms or strategic plans, but in these organic connections between young people eager to learn and grow together. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had become a key partner in the expansion, entered with a new group of parents. "They came to see for themselves," she explained. "Word is spreading through the neighborhoods. Parents who never thought their children could have these opportunities are starting to dream bigger." The parents watched in amazement as their community's children worked confidently with advanced technology, collaborated on complex projects, and taught each other new skills. One mother wiped away tears as her son demonstrated the educational app he was developing. "This is more than just a program," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is a door opening to a future we couldn't even imagine before." As the afternoon continued, Alexander found himself in a quiet corner, observing the bustling activity throughout the building. Students moved seamlessly between virtual and physical collaboration spaces. Mentors shared knowledge across locations, and new ideas sparked constant innovation. Sarah approached him, tablet in hand as usual. "We're thinking about the next phase," she said, pulling up a detailed proposal. "Sister, what if we created a network of student-led innovation hubs? Not just for technology education, but for community problem-solving. We could use our platform to connect young innovators across the city." Alexander smiled, remembering the shy girl, who had once struggled with algebra. "You're not just thinking about expanding the program anymore, are you? You're thinking about transforming the whole system." "You taught us to dream big," she replied with a grin. "But more importantly, you showed us how to turn those dreams into reality." Through the windows, the city skyline caught the late afternoon sun, its buildings glowing with possibility. The foundation had started as one man's journey from emptiness to purpose, but it had grown into something far more powerful, a catalyst for systemic change, powered by the boundless potential of young minds unleashed. 6 months into the expansion, the foundation's success had created an unexpected challenge. The flood of interest from corporations and communities across the country was overwhelming their capacity to respond. Every day brought new requests for partnerships, consultations, and program implementations. Alexander sat in what had become known as the strategy room, surrounded by maps, charts, and digital displays showing the growing network of foundation locations. Grace and Sarah were with him, along with James Chen and Marcus Sterling, all grappling with the complexity of their success. "We have inquiries from 23 cities, Marcus reported, scrolling through his tablet. "Everyone wants to replicate what we've built here. The problem is we can't be everywhere at once." Sarah, who had recently celebrated her 16th birthday by launching a citywide coding competition, pulled up her latest analysis. "The mentor network is stretched thin," she explained. "We're maintaining quality in our existing programs, but scaling further requires more than just resources. It requires leadership." James nodded thoughtfully. "Technology can bridge distances, but the human element is crucial. What makes this work is the culture we've built, the relationships we've fostered." "That's exactly it," Grace interjected. "We're not just running programs. We're cultivating ecosystems of learning and support. You can't package that in a manual." Alexander watched as real-time data flowed across the screens, showing activity across their network of locations. Each point of light represented lives being transformed, potential being unlocked. The success was undeniable, but so was the weight of responsibility it brought. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Elizabeth Chen entered, accompanied by a distinguished-looking woman none of them recognized. "I apologize for the interruption," Elizabeth said, "but I believe we may have found part of the solution to our scaling challenge. Allow me to introduce Dr. Helena Rivera from the National Education Innovation Institute." Dr. Rivera stepped forward, her eyes taking in the technology-rich environment with evident interest. "What you've created here is remarkable," she said, "but more importantly, it's replicable, if approached correctly." She moved to the digital display, studying the network map. "Your challenge isn't just about resources or technology. It's about preserving the essential elements of your model while allowing it to evolve in new contexts." Sarah perked up, recognition dawning. Read your papers on adaptive learning systems. Your work on scalable mentorship models was part of our inspiration for the matching algorithm." Dr. Rivera smiled warmly. "And I've been following your innovations here. Your student-led approach to technology education is revolutionary, which is exactly why I'm here." She turned to address the room. "The Institute has been studying successful educational transformation models. We believe the Foundation's approach could be the key to reimagining how we prepare young people for the future. But it needs to be scaled thoughtfully, systematically." Marcus leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A partnership," Dr. Rivera replied. "One that would allow us to study your model, document its essential elements, and create frameworks for adaptation in different contexts. Not to standardize it, but to understand how it can be authentically replicated." Alexander exchanged glances with Grace. They had been wrestling with this very challenge, how to share their success without losing the soul of what made it work. Sarah, however, was already typing furiously on her tablet. "We could use our platform," she exclaimed. "The mentor matching system already learns from successful relationships. If we expanded its analytics to track program elements that work in different contexts—" "Exactly," Dr. Rivera nodded approvingly. "Combined with the Institute's research capabilities, we could create an adaptive framework for implementing the Foundation model in diverse communities." James Chen had been quietly observing, but now he spoke up. "Global tech could contribute to this. We've been developing AI systems for educational customization. Combined with your research and the Foundation's practical experience, we could create a learning system that evolves with each implementation." Grace finished, catching the vision. "Each new location wouldn't just be copying our model, they'd be contributing to its evolution." Alexander stood, walking to the window. Below, he could see students arriving for afternoon sessions, their energy and purpose visible even from above. Each one represented not just individual potential, but the possibility of systemic change. "When I started this journey," he said quietly, "it was about filling a void in my own life. Then it became about creating opportunities for these amazing young people. Now," he turned back to the room, "now it's about transforming how we think about education, community, and corporate responsibility." Dr. Rivera smiled. "That's precisely why this works. It's not just a program, it's a movement. And movements grow not through replication, but through inspiration and adaptation." Sarah's hand shot up, her old habit emerging in moments of excitement. "What if we started with a pilot? Select a few cities with different characteristics, implement the program with careful monitoring and analysis, let each location develop its own personality while maintaining the core principles." The room buzzed with energy as they began to explore the possibilities. On the screens around them, the network of lights continued to pulse, each one representing a story of transformation. The challenge of success was real, but so was the opportunity it presented, the chance to create lasting systemic change on a scale they had only dreamed of before. The pilot program launched in 5 cities, each chosen for its unique characteristics and challenges. From a rural community in the Midwest to a bustling port city on the coast, each location would test the Foundation model's adaptability while maintaining its core principles. Alexander found himself traveling frequently, visiting each site as they established their programs. But it was the video conferences that truly showed the model's potential. Every week, student leaders from all locations connected virtually, sharing experiences and innovations. One such conference was underway in the Foundation's main hall. Sarah stood before a wall of screens, each showing faces of young people from different cities. They were discussing their latest initiative, a cross-location project to develop technology solutions for local environmental challenges. In E, our city, we're focusing on water quality monitoring, a student from the coastal location explained. We're adapting the coding framework Sarah's team developed to create a citizen science platform. A girl from the Midwest location chimed in, we're using similar principles for agricultural sustainability. Our mentors from the local farming community are helping us understand the real-world applications. Dr. Rivera, who had been observing the session, made notes on her tablet. The organic evolution of the program in each location is fascinating, she whispered to Alexander. They're maintaining the core elements, mentorship, technology education, community connection, while adapting to local needs. Grace joined, them bearing fresh data from the Institute's analysis. The preliminary results are encouraging, she reported. Each location is showing similar patterns of student engagement and achievement, but with unique local characteristics. On screen, the students had moved on to discussing their mentorship experiences. A boy from an urban location shared how their program had partnered with local artists to create digital art installations addressing social issues. That's the beauty of the model, James Chen observed, having joined them for the weekly update. It provides the framework and tools, but the communities shape the actual implementation. Sarah stepped away from the screens to join their conversation. The mentor matching algorithm is learning from each location, she explained, pulling up detailed analytics. We're seeing patterns in what makes successful mentorship relationships across different contexts. Marcus Sterling arrived, looking pleased. The financial data supports the expansion, he reported. Other companies are following our lead, investing in similar initiatives in their communities. It's creating a ripple effect in corporate responsibility practices. The video conference continued, with students sharing successes and challenges. They were no longer just participants in a program. They were pioneers, helping to shape the future of education and community development. I've been studying educational innovations for 20 years, Dr. Rivera said, watching the interactions. What's happening here is unique. It's not just about teaching skills or providing opportunities. It's about empowering young people to become agents of change in their own communities. Alexander thought back to his first encounter with Grace, to the emptiness that had led him to the foundation. How far they had come from those early days. The void he had sought to fill had become a wellspring of transformation, not just for him but for communities across the country. A commotion on the screens drew their attention back to the conference. The students had spontaneously organized themselves into cross-location project teams, proposing collaborative solutions that would connect their communities. We could create a network of environmental monitoring stations, one team suggested. Share data between cities, track patterns, work together on solutions. And use machine learning to analyze the data, another student added. Identify trends, predict problems before they become serious. Sarah beamed with pride at her peers' initiative. This is what we hoped would happen, she told Alexander. The technology and knowledge we share becomes a platform for innovation, but the students make it their own. Grace nodded thoughtfully. Each location is like a seed, growing in its own way but connected to all the others. The foundation isn't just expanding, it's evolving. Through the windows, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. In the distance, construction had begun on a new technology center, funded by a consortium of companies inspired by the foundation's success. The skyline was changing, not just with new buildings, but with new possibilities. Dr. Rivera made a final note on her tablet. What you've created here isn't just a program or even a model. It's a new paradigm for how business, education, and community can work together. And these young people are showing us the way forward. Alexander watched as the students continued their passionate discussion, planning projects that would connect their cities and communities in ways he had never imagined. The foundation had started as one man's journey from emptiness to purpose, but it had become something far greater, a catalyst for transformation that was spreading across the country, one young innovator at a time. 1 year into the national expansion, an unexpected discovery emerged from the Foundation's data analytics team. Sarah and her fellow student researchers had noticed a pattern in their mentor matching algorithm that no one had anticipated. "Look at this," she said, presenting her findings to Alexander, Grace, and Dr. Rivera in the strategy room. The screens displayed complex networks of connections between Foundation locations across the country. It's not just about individual mentorship anymore. We're seeing whole communities starting to connect and collaborate. Dr. Rivera leaned forward, studying the data with intense interest. These patterns, they're showing organic network formation. Communities that have never interacted before are finding common ground through their students' projects. A practical example of this phenomenon was unfolding in real time. On the main screen, students from the rural Midwest location were conferencing with their coastal city counterparts, discussing how their agricultural monitoring system could be adapted for urban farming initiatives. "Our soil sensors could help. Your rooftop gardens," a Midwest student explained, sharing technical specifications, "and your water management algorithms would be perfect for our irrigation systems." Grace watched the interaction with wonder. They're not just sharing technology, they're bridging cultural divides. These children are creating connections that adults have struggled to build for generations. The door opened as James Chen arrived with unexpected guests, a delegation of international education experts who had been following the Foundation's progress. They stood transfixed by the student presentation unfolding before them. "This is remarkable," one of the delegates commented. "In our country, we've been trying to bridge the urban-rural divide for years. Here, your students are doing it naturally, through shared innovation." Sarah pulled up another data set. "We're seeing similar patterns across all our locations. When we let students lead the collaboration, they focus on solving common problems rather than dwelling on differences." Alexander thought back to his corporate days, remembering how much effort went into forced partnerships and strategic alliances. Yet here, genuine collaboration was happening organically, driven by young people's natural desire to learn and help each other. Marcus Sterling entered the room, his expression animated. "You need to see this," he said, pulling up a financial report. "The collaborative projects between locations are generating significant interest from investors. They're seeing the potential for scalable solutions to common community challenges." On Sahe, the screens the student discussion had evolved. They were now planning a joint workshop where teams from both locations would work together in person, sharing skills and perspectives. "We could host it at our farm tech lab," the Midwest group suggested. "Show you how we're using drones for crop monitoring. And then come to our marine science center," their coastal peers countered. "The principles are similar, just applied to different environments." Dr. Rivera made rapid notes on her tablet. "This is beyond what we anticipated in the pilot program. The students aren't just learning technical skills, they're developing cross-cultural competencies, systems thinking, collaborative problem-solving abilities. And they're having fun doing it," Grace added, smiling as she watched the animated exchanges between locations. A notification popped up on the main screen. Another Foundation location was requesting to join the discussion. This time it was from a small mountain town where students had developed innovations for wildlife conservation. "Their environmental monitoring techniques could benefit both our projects," Sarah noted, quickly facilitating the connection. Within minutes, the three groups were deep in discussion, finding unexpected synergies between their seemingly different challenges. Alexander moved to the window, his reflection barely visible against the darkening sky. The city lights were coming on, each one representing a story, a possibility, a connection waiting to be made. "When we started this expansion," he said quietly, "we thought we were creating a network of educational programs, but what we've actually built is a platform for human connection." James Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Technology is just the medium. The real innovation is in how these young people are using it to break down barriers we didn't even realize existed." Outside, the first stars were becoming visible, twinkling above the city lights. Inside, on screens throughout the building, Similar lights pulsed on the network maps, each one representing a point of connection in the growing foundation community. Sarah's voice drew their attention back to the main screen. "We should create a showcase," she was saying to the assembled students, "not just of our technical solutions, but of how we're working together. Show the world what's possible when we focus on what connects us rather than what divides us." The international delegates exchanged meaningful glances. What they were witnessing wasn't just an educational program or a social initiative. It was a new model of human collaboration, emerging organically from the minds and hearts of young people who hadn't yet learned to see borders as barriers. The student showcase was scheduled for spring, when the pilot locations would come together for the first time in person. As preparations began, the Foundation's main facility buzzed with an energy that transcended its physical space, connecting virtually with locations across the country. Sarah and her team had transformed the mentor matching platform into something far more ambitious, a virtual collaboration space where students from different locations could work together in real time, sharing ideas and building solutions across distances. "It's like a social network," she explained to a group of visiting educators, "but focused on creation rather than consumption. Every connection is built around a shared project or goal." The showcase preparations had taken an unexpected turn when students began incorporating their community's cultural elements into their technical presentations. The Midwest team was planning to demonstrate their agricultural innovations through traditional harvest festival games, while the coastal group was integrating local maritime folklore into their marine conservation project. "They're not just sharing technology," Grace observed during a planning meeting. "They're sharing stories, traditions, ways of seeing the world. The innovation is becoming a bridge between cultures." Alexander watched as Marcus Sterling reviewed the budget for the upcoming event. The CFO, who had once opposed everything the Foundation stood for, was now one of its strongest advocates, finding innovative ways to channel corporate resources into community development. "The return on investment goes far beyond financial metrics," Marcus explained to a group of business leaders. "We're seeing transformations in community engagement, workforce development, and social innovation that traditional corporate programs never achieved." Dr. Rivera's research team had documented unexpected ripple effects in the pilot communities. Parents who had come to the Foundation seeking opportunities for their children were now engaged in their own learning journeys. Local businesses were adapting their practices based on student innovations. Community leaders were rethinking their approach to development. One afternoon, as Alexander walked through the facility, he paused to watch a virtual session in progress. Students from the mountain location were teaching their coastal peers about wildlife tracking techniques, while learning about marine ecosystem monitoring in return. "It's amazing," James Chen said, joining him at the observation window. "They're creating a new kind of knowledge exchange, one that values both traditional wisdom and technological innovation." Sarah appeared, tablet in hand as usual. "Wait until you see what we're planning for the showcase," she said excitedly. "Each location will present their innovations, but we're also creating collaborative projects that combine different approaches to similar challenges." She pulled up a preview of the showcase program. The schedule wasn't organized by location or project type, but by themes that crossed geographical and cultural boundaries: environmental sustainability, community health, educational access, cultural preservation. "The students came up with the format," Grace explained, joining their conversation. "They said it made more sense to focus on what connects us than what separates us." Through the window, they could see a group of younger students working with new mentors, teenagers who had started in the Foundation's original programs and were now passing on their knowledge to the next generation. "Look at that, Doctor," Rivera said softly, making another note on her ever-present tablet. "The cycle is completing itself. These young people aren't just participants anymore, they're becoming leaders in their own right." Marcus approached with an update from the corporate partners. "The business community is watching this closely," he reported. "They're starting to understand that this isn't just about corporate social responsibility, it's about reimagining how business and community can interact." On the screens around them, students from different locations continued their collaborative work, their conversations flowing seamlessly between technical discussions and cultural exchanges. The technology that connected them was sophisticated, but it was their natural inclination to share, learn, and grow together that made the connections meaningful. Alexander thought about his journey, from the emptiness of corporate success to the richness of meaningful connection. The foundation had grown far beyond his initial vision, becoming something he could never have planned or designed. "You know what's most remarkable," Grace said, watching the students work. "We didn't have to teach them how to connect across differences. We just had to create the space and give them the tools. They showed us how it's done." Sarah nodded, adding, "Because when you're focused on solving real problems and creating something meaningful, the differences don't matter as much as what you can achieve together." Outside, the city was preparing for spring, new growth pushing through old concrete, much like the way the Foundation's influence was transforming communities across the country. What had started as one man's search for purpose had become a movement, powered by the boundless potential of young minds working together across all kinds of boundaries. As spring approached, the Foundation's influence had begun to transform the very fabric of corporate culture across the country. Companies that had once measured success purely in profit margins were now actively seeking ways to integrate community development into their core business strategies. Alexander found himself in an unexpected position, not just as a business leader, but as a catalyst for systemic change. One morning, he arrived at the Foundation to find the main hall transformed into a sophisticated command center for the upcoming showcase event. Sarah and her team had created an interactive digital map that tracked real-time collaborations between locations. "Each light represents an active project," she explained, gesturing to the pulsing network displayed on the massive screen. "When you select one, you can see the connections it's creating." She clicked on a glowing point in the Midwest. The display expanded to show a web of relationships, students collaborating on technology projects, communities sharing resources, businesses offering support and mentorship. "But here's what's really interesting," Sarah continued, pulling up another layer of data. "These connections are generating their own connections. It's like a chain reaction of positive change." Dr. Rivera, who had been analyzing the patterns, stepped forward. "We're seeing what sociologists call emergent behavior, complex social networks forming organically around shared goals and values. It's remarkable how the students' collaborative approach is influencing adult behaviors in their communities." Grace entered with James Chen and a group of international observers. The Foundation's success had attracted attention from around the world, with educators and business leaders eager to understand and replicate its model. "The key," James was explaining to the visitors, "isn't just in the technology or the programs. It's in the fundamental shift in how we think about education, business, and community development. These aren't separate spheres, they're interconnected parts of a larger ecosystem." A notification popped up on the main screen. The coastal location was going live with their latest project presentation. The group gathered to watch as students demonstrated an innovative water quality monitoring system they'd developed in collaboration with local fishermen and environmental scientists. "Our data-sharing platform connects traditional ecological knowledge with modern sensing technology," a young presenter explained. "The fishermen know things about local water patterns that no sensor could detect, while our technology helps track changes they might miss." Marcus Sterling, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "This is what's catching the attention of major investors. These students aren't just creating technical solutions. They're building bridges between different ways of knowing and working." The presentation continued, showing how the project had sparked collaboration between previously disconnected groups in the community. Local businesses were adopting more sustainable practices, schools were incorporating environmental education into their curricula, and community leaders were making data-driven decisions about resource management. "It's not just about the immediate impact," Dr. Rivera noted, making rapid entries in her research log. "These young people are creating new models of problem-solving that could be applied to all kinds of challenges." Alexander moved through the facility, watching as similar scenes played out in different areas. In one room, students were teaching senior citizens how to use digital tools to share their life stories. In another, young entrepreneurs were working with experienced business leaders to develop socially conscious startups. Sarah appeared at his side, tablet in hand as always. "We've been tracking the long-term effects in our original location," she said, pulling up a detailed analysis. "The changes go way beyond what we initially expected." The data showed increased community engagement, improved educational outcomes, and stronger social connections across demographic boundaries. But more importantly, it showed how the Foundation's influence had begun to reshape people's expectations of what was possible. "Look at this," Sarah pointed to a particular metric. "When we started, most students saw business and community service as separate paths. Now they're developing hybrid models that combine profit with purpose." Grace joined them, her expression thoughtful. "It's like watching a garden grow," she said. "We planted some seeds, but the way they've taken root and spread, that's beyond anything we could have planned." Through the windows, the city sprawled beneath the spring sunshine. Alexander could see construction underway on several new buildings, community centers, innovation hubs, and educational facilities, all inspired by the Foundation's model. "You know what's most remarkable?" he said quietly. "We started this, thinking we were going to change lives through technology and education. But what we're really doing is changing how people think about connection, community, and possibility." Sarah nodded, adding another data point to her ever-growing analysis. "The technology just makes it easier to see what was always true. We're all connected, and when we work together, there's no limit to what we can achieve." As the day continued, more updates flowed in from locations across the country. Each report showed not just successful projects, but transformative changes in how communities approached challenges and opportunities. The Foundation hadn't just created a program, it had sparked a movement that was growing beyond anyone's expectations. The week before the national showcase, the Foundation's original location hummed with anticipation. Students and staff from all pilot locations were arriving, turning the facility into a vibrant mosaic of faces, voices, and ideas from across the country. Sarah stood in the newly expanded main hall, now transformed into a sophisticated presentation space, running final checks on the interactive displays. Each station would showcase not just individual projects, but the web of connections and collaborations they had sparked. "Everything's ready," she reported to Alexander and Grace. "The virtual integration systems are working perfectly. Even people who can't be here physically will be able to participate in real time." Grace watched as students from different locations met face-to-face for the first time, though they had been collaborating virtually for months. There were hugs, excited chatter, and immediate dives into technical discussions as they showed each other their latest innovations. "Look at them," she said softly. "They've been working together for months, solving complex problems across thousands of miles, and now they're meeting like old friends." Dr. Rivera arrived with her research team, their tablets filled with data from the pilot program's first year. "The results are extraordinary," she announced. "The model isn't just working. It's exceeding all our expectations in terms of educational outcomes, community impact, and social connection." Marcus Sterling and James Chen entered with a group of corporate leaders who had flown in for the showcase. The business community's interest had grown beyond mere curiosity. They were now actively seeking to understand and adopt the Foundation's approach to community engagement. "The old model of corporate social responsibility is obsolete," Marcus was explaining. "What these young people have shown us is that real value comes from genuine integration between business and community needs." A commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Mrs. Rodriguez had arrived with a delegation from her neighborhood, including many parents who had been skeptical of the program at first. Now they watched with pride as their children confidently demonstrated complex technical solutions to community challenges. "My daughter never spoke up in class before," one mother shared, wiping away tears. "Now she's teaching coding to adults in our community center." The afternoon brought more arrivals, educators, community leaders, and students from potential new locations. The Foundation's success had created a waiting list of communities eager to implement their own versions of the program. Sarah led a tour group through the facility, explaining how the mentor matching system had evolved into a comprehensive platform for community collaboration. The technology is important, she explained, but it's really about creating spaces where people can connect, learn, and work together. In the technology lab, students from the coastal location were setting up their marine monitoring equipment alongside the Midwest team's agricultural sensors. What had started as separate projects had evolved into an integrated system for environmental management that could be adapted for different contexts. "See how the data patterns overlap," a student explained to visitors. "The same principles that help us track ocean health can be applied to soil quality. We're not just sharing technology, we're sharing ways of thinking about complex systems." Alexander found himself in a quiet corner, watching the activity with Grace and Dr. Rivera. "When I started this journey," he reflected, "I was looking for purpose. I never imagined it would lead to this." "That's because you were willing to let it grow beyond your initial vision," Grace replied. "You provided the spark, but then you let these young people take it in directions none of us could have predicted." Dr. Rivera nodded, adding, "What's remarkable is how the program has maintained its core principles while adapting to different contexts. Each location has its own unique character, but they're all connected by shared values and approaches." As evening approached, the facility filled with the sounds of final preparations for the next day's showcase. Students made last-minute adjustments to their presentations, while mentors and staff ensured everything was in place for the hundreds of expected visitors. Sarah approached with her tablet showing the final schedule. "We're ready," she said simply, but her eyes shone with pride and anticipation. Through the windows, the city lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Tomorrow, this space would be filled with people from across the country, all coming together to witness what was possible when barriers were replaced with bridges, when competition gave way to collaboration, when technology served as a tool for human connection rather than separation. Alexander looked at the faces around him, students and mentors, business leaders and community members, all part of something that had grown far beyond its original scope. The Foundation hadn't just created a program, it had sparked a movement that was reimagining the relationship between business, education, and community. The morning of the National Showcase dawned bright and clear. Alexander arrived early to find the Foundation's building already alive, with activity. Students from all locations were making final adjustments to their presentations, their excitement palpable in the morning air. Sarah greeted him at the entrance, her tablet displaying real-time updates from the virtual participation platform. "We already have over 10,000 people logged into the live stream," she reported, "and that's just the beginning." The main hall had been transformed into an immersive showcase space. Interactive displays highlighted projects from each location, while a central holographic map showed the growing network of connections between communities. The technology was impressive, but it was the energy of the young presenters that truly brought the space to life. Grace arrived with the first wave of visitors, corporate leaders, educators, and community representatives from across the country. Among them was a familiar face, the woman who had once been Alexander's harshest critic on the board. "I was wrong about you, Alexander," she admitted, taking in the bustling scene. "This isn't just corporate philanthropy, it's a completely new model for how business and community can work together." Before he could respond, the showcase officially began. Sarah took the stage, her confidence evident as she addressed the packed hall and the thousands watching virtually. "Welcome to the future of connection," she began. "What you'll see today isn't just a collection of projects, it's a glimpse of what's possible when we break down the barriers between technology, business, and community." The presentations began with the coastal location's marine conservation project. Students demonstrated how their monitoring system had not only improved water quality, but had created new partnerships between fishing communities, environmental scientists, and local businesses. "Our technology doesn't replace traditional knowledge," a young presenter explained. "It enhances it, creating a bridge between different ways of understanding our environment. Next came the Midwest team's Agricultural Innovation Showcase. Their soil monitoring system had evolved into a comprehensive platform for sustainable farming, incorporating both cutting-edge technology and generations of farming wisdom. Marcus Sterling watched with evident pride as students presented the economic impacts of their projects. These aren't just feel-good initiatives, he explained to a group of business leaders. They're creating measurable value while solving real community challenges. Throughout the day, presentations flowed seamlessly between physical and virtual spaces. Students from different locations demonstrated how their collaborative projects had grown beyond initial expectations, creating solutions that could be adapted for various contexts. Dr. Rivera moved through the crowd, her research team documenting the unprecedented levels of engagement and cross-pollination of ideas. What we're seeing here, she told a group of educators, is the emergence of a new kind of learning ecosystem, one that dissolves traditional boundaries between education, innovation, and community development. In the technology lab, James Chen watched as students demonstrated their latest innovations. This isn't just about teaching coding or engineering, he observed. These young people are developing a new way of thinking about problem solving, one that considers social impact alongside technical excellence. The afternoon brought a series of unexpected announcements. Several major corporations, inspired by the Foundation's success, pledged to implement similar programs in their communities. Educational institutions announced partnerships to adapt the model for their contexts. Government agencies expressed interest in scaling the approach nationally. But the most powerful moments came from the personal stories. Parents spoke about watching their children transform from passive consumers of technology to active creators of solutions. Community leaders shared how the program had bridged long-standing divides. Business leaders admitted how their understanding of corporate responsibility had fundamentally shifted. Sarah found Alexander watching a group of younger students excitedly explaining their projects to visitors. "Remember when I could barely understand algebra?" she asked with a smile. "Now look at what all of us have created together." Grace joined them, her eyes misting as she watched her original vision expand beyond anything she had imagined. "It was never just about teaching skills or providing opportunities," she said softly. "It was about showing people what's possible when we believe in each other." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the facility's windows, Alexander stood at the back of the hall, taking in the scene. The space was filled with conversation, collaboration, and connection, people from different backgrounds and communities finding common ground in their shared vision for the future. Dr. Rivera appeared beside him, her tablet finally set aside. "You know what's truly remarkable," she said. "This isn't the culmination of something, it's just the beginning. These young people aren't just presenting projects, they're showing us a new way forward." Through the windows, the city skyline glowed in the evening light. Somewhere out there, Alexander knew, countless other lives waited to be transformed, countless other connections waited to be made. The Foundation had grown far beyond his initial search for purpose, becoming a catalyst for change that would ripple through generations. The evening of the showcase brought a moment that nobody had planned, but seemed somehow inevitable. As the formal presentations concluded and the crowd began to thin, Sarah gathered a group of students from all locations in the original classroom where she had first learned algebra with Alexander. "I want to show you something," she said, pulling up an old photograph on the main screen. It showed her first meeting with Alexander, both of them bent over a math textbook. This is where it all started, not with grand plans or corporate initiatives, but with one person choosing to help another. Alexander, who had been passing by, stopped in the doorway, moved by the unexpected tribute. The room was packed with students, each one representing a different thread in the tapestry the Foundation had woven. "Mr. Pierce taught me more than algebra that day," Sarah continued. "He showed me that success isn't measured by what you achieve for yourself, but by how many others you help achieve their dreams." One by one, students began sharing their own stories of transformation. A boy from the coastal location described, how the program had helped him connect his community's traditional fishing knowledge with modern conservation technology. A girl from the Midwest spoke about bridging the gap between her family's farming heritage and digital innovation. Grace appeared beside Alexander in the doorway, watching the spontaneous gathering. "Look at what you started," she whispered. But Alexander shook his head. "I didn't start this," he replied quietly. "I just opened a door. They're the ones who walked through it and showed us all what was possible." The students had begun discussing their visions for the future. Their ideas flowed seamlessly between local challenges and global possibilities, between technical solutions and human connections. "We shouldn't think of the foundation as a program anymore," one student suggested. "It's more like a movement, a way of bringing people together to solve problems and create opportunities." Marcus Sterling and James Chen joined the growing audience in the doorway. The sight of young people from such different backgrounds, speaking a common language of innovation and community impact, was powerful validation of everything they had worked toward. "You know what's remarkable?" James observed. "They don't see technology as an end in itself. For them, it's just a tool for building connections and solving real problems." Sarah was now showing their latest platform developments, tools that would make it easier for new locations to implement the Foundation's model while maintaining their unique local character. "The technology helps us scale," she explained, "but the real innovation is in how we think about community, education, and business. They're not separate things. They're all part of the same ecosystem." Dr. Rivera, who had been quietly taking notes, finally spoke up. "What we're witnessing here is more than just the success of a program. It's the emergence of a new generation that understands something fundamental, that true progress comes from bringing people together, not pulling them apart." As the evening deepened, the impromptu gathering showed no signs of dispersing. Students continued sharing stories, exchanging ideas and making plans for future collaborations. The energy in the room was electric with possibility. Alexander found himself thinking back to that night when he had stood alone in his penthouse, surrounded by success but empty of purpose. How far he had come from that moment of despair to this evening filled with hope and connection. Grace touched his arm gently. "You're thinking about that night, aren't you?" she asked, knowing him well enough to read his expression. He nodded. "I thought I had everything then, but I had nothing that really mattered. Now." He gestured to the room full of engaged, passionate young people. "Now I understand what real success looks like." Sarah approached them, her tablet finally set aside for once. "We've been talking," she said, indicating the gathered students. "We want to create a mentorship network that connects all our locations so every new student has access to the kind of support and guidance that changed my life." The simple statement captured everything the Foundation had become, a self-sustaining cycle of transformation where those who had been helped became helpers themselves, where success was measured not in personal achievement but in collective impact. As the night drew to a close, the students began exchanging contact information and making plans for future projects. They were no longer just participants in a program. They were leaders of a movement that was reshaping the relationship between business, technology, and community. Through the classroom windows, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing a story of possibility. The Foundation had started as one man's journey from emptiness to purpose, but it had become something far greater, a beacon of hope, showing what was possible when people chose connection over isolation, collaboration over competition, and purpose over profit. In the weeks following the national showcase, the Foundation's impact continued to ripple outward in unexpected ways. One morning, Alexander arrived at the facility to find Sarah leading a virtual workshop with students from 3 continents, sharing the Foundation's model with young innovators around the world. "It's amazing," she told him during a break. "They all face different challenges, but they understand immediately what we're trying to do here. It's like we're speaking a universal language of possibility." The Foundation's original building had become a hub of constant innovation and connection. In the main hall, Dr. Rivera was presenting her comprehensive research findings to a group of international education experts. The data told a compelling story of transformation, not just in educational outcomes, but in community resilience and social cohesion. What we're seeing here, she explained, pointing to complex charts of interconnected data, is the emergence of a new model of social innovation, one that integrates education, technology, and community development in ways we've never seen before. Grace appeared with unexpected news. The governor's office had called, wanting to implement the foundation's model across the entire state. But it was the reason that touched Alexander deeply. The governor's daughter had attended the showcase and hadn't stopped talking about what she'd seen. "It's always personal stories that drive real change," Grace observed, watching as another group of visitors toured the facility. "Numbers and data matter, but it's the human connection that makes people believe in possibility." Marcus Sterling, who had become one of the Foundation's strongest advocates, was meeting with a consortium of business leaders. They weren't just discussing funding, they were exploring how to fundamentally reshape corporate engagement with communities. "The old model of corporate social responsibility is dead," he declared. "These young people have shown us a new way forward, one where business success and social impact aren't just compatible, they're inseparable." In the technology lab, James Chen watched as students demonstrated their latest innovations. What had started as simple coding projects had evolved into sophisticated platforms for community problem-solving. But it wasn't the technology that impressed him most. It was the way the students naturally thought about impact and connection in everything they created. "They don't see technology as separate from human needs," he noted. "For them, innovation is always about bringing people together, solving real problems, creating meaningful connections." Throughout the day, Alexander found himself revisiting different spaces in the building, each one holding memories of how far they'd come. The classroom where he'd first taught Sarah algebra was now a bustling innovation lab. The conference room where he'd faced down his board was a collaboration space where students and community leaders worked together on new initiatives. Sarah found him in the early evening, standing by the window where he'd once questioned everything about his life's direction. "You know what I realized," she said, joining him at the window. "We're not just teaching skills or creating opportunities anymore. We're showing people what's possible when they believe in themselves and each other." She pulled up her tablet, showing him their latest data. The Foundation's network now connected thousands of students across multiple countries, each location adding its own unique perspective to the growing movement. "But here's what's really amazing," she continued, switching to a different view. "Look at how many of our original students are now leading their own initiatives. The cycle of transformation just keeps growing." Grace joined them, carrying a framed photo she'd just discovered, the original Foundation team, standing in the empty building before any of this had begun. "Remember when we thought we were just starting a community program?" she asked with a smile. Alexander took the photo, studying the faces of people who had believed in possibility before they could see it. "We were trying to change lives," he said quietly. "We never imagined how much our own lives would change in the process." Through the windows, the city stretched out before them, each light representing a story, a possibility, a connection waiting to be made. The Foundation had become more than a program or even a movement. It was a testament to what could happen when people chose to believe in the power of human connection. As evening fell, the facility remained alive with activity. Students continued working on projects, mentors shared guidance, and new visitors arrived to learn about what was possible. The energy was different now, no longer the nervous excitement of a new venture, but the steady pulse of sustained transformation. In the quiet of his office, Alexander found Sarah's original thank you card, now framed on his wall. The simple drawing of a bridge between worlds had become a powerful symbol of everything they'd achieved. But more importantly, it represented everything that was still possible. The real legacy, he realized, isn't in the programs we've created or the lives we've touched. It's in showing people that there's always a way to build bridges, to create connections, to transform emptiness into purpose. 5 years after the National Showcase, Alexander stood in the observation deck of the Foundation's new global headquarters. The sprawling campus below buzzed with activity, a living testament to how far they'd come from those first uncertain days. Sarah, now heading the Foundation's International Youth Leadership Program, joined him at the window. She'd grown into a poised young woman, but her eyes still held the same spark of possibility that had changed both their lives that day on the bridge. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it," she said, gesturing to the campus below. "Remember when I couldn't understand quadratic equations? Now we're helping young people around the world believe in their own potential." The Foundation had evolved in ways none of them could have predicted. What started as a local education initiative had become a global movement for social innovation, but its core principle remained unchanged: the belief that true transformation happens through human connection. Grace appeared with their latest impact report. The numbers were impressive: thousands of locations across 6 continents, millions of lives touched, countless innovations spawned. But it was the stories behind the numbers that truly mattered. "Look at this," she said, pulling up a video on the wall screen. It showed students from different countries collaborating on solutions to climate change, poverty, and social inequality. Their approaches were different, their contexts unique, but they shared a common language of possibility and purpose. Marcus Sterling and James Chen arrived for their weekly leadership meeting. Both had transformed their own corporations based on the Foundation's principles, creating a new model of business that measured success by social impact as well as profit. "The business world is finally catching up," Marcus reported. "Companies are realizing that community engagement isn't just about charity. It's about creating sustainable value for everyone." Dr. Rivera, whose research had helped validate the Foundation's approach, joined them with exciting news. Major universities were incorporating their model into their curricula, recognizing that the future of education lay in connecting classroom learning with real-world impact. But the most significant change, she noted, is in how people think about possibility. The Foundation has shown that transformation isn't just about resources or technology. It's about believing in the power of human connection. As they gathered for their meeting, Alexander looked around the table. Each person represented a different thread in the tapestry they'd woven together: business, education, technology, community development. But more than that, they represented the power of purpose to transform lives. Sarah opened her presentation with a familiar image, her original thank you card with its simple drawing of a bridge. "This is still what we're about," she said. "Building bridges between people, between communities, between possibilities." The meeting focused not on what they'd achieved, but on what was still possible. New initiatives were taking shape: programs to address global challenges, platforms for cross-cultural collaboration, innovations that would further break down barriers between people and possibilities. As evening approached, Alexander found himself back at the observation window. The campus lights were coming on, each one representing a story of transformation. But beyond the campus, the city stretched to the horizon, and beyond that, a world still full of possibilities waiting to be realized. Grace joined him, remembering their first meeting. "You were looking for purpose," she said softly. "Instead, you found a way to help others find theirs." Sarah appeared with her tablet, but for once she wasn't looking at data or projects. "You know what I tell new students when they join the program?" she asked. "I tell them about that day when someone chose to see possibility instead of emptiness, and how that choice created ripples that are still spreading." Through the gathering dusk, they could see new students arriving for evening programs, each one carrying dreams and potential. The Foundation had grown far beyond its original vision, but its essence remained the same: the belief that every person carries within them the seed of transformation, waiting only for the light of possibility to grow. "We're not just building programs or teaching skills," Alexander realized. "We're showing people that there's always a bridge to be built, always a connection to be made, always a way to turn emptiness into purpose." As night fell over the city, the lights below twinkled like stars. each one a reminder that transformation never truly ends. It simply continues, passing from person to person, community to community, each story of change inspiring the next. The foundation had started as one man's journey from despair to purpose, but it had become something far greater, a testament to the endless possibilities that emerge when people choose to believe in each other, to connect across differences, to see in every challenge an opportunity for transformation. And somewhere in the city, another life was about to change, another bridge was about to be built, another story of transformation was about to begin.